All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into the world of Chinese pharmaceuticals,
Pharmaceuticals, okay.
but with a comedic twist.
Oh, a twist. All right, I like it.
Yeah, so we're not going to be, pouring over like boring research papers and statistics and all that stuff. Instead,
Yeah.
our primary source today is this satirical dialogue called Pills and Bills. And it's basically like a comedic sketch
Okay.
that uses humor to kind of poke fun at, the anxieties that a lot of people in China have about healthcare.
Using humor to kind of explore anxieties about something like healthcare. It sounds like a really interesting way to get at some deeper truths.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what this deep dive is all about. We're trying to unpack like what makes this dialogue funny, right?
Right.
But also what does it reveal about the realities of healthcare in China for everyday people?
Okay, sounds good.
So this dialogue, it starts off with this guy named Lao Li. And Lao Li, he's got this like terrible cough, right?
Okay.
So he goes to the doctor and he asks for imported cough medicine.
Interesting. So right away, we're seeing this kind of theme of this preference for imported medicine that we hear about a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the doctor's response is where the humor starts to come in. He's like, yeah, we've got that imported cough medicine, but it's going to cost you 10 times more than the local brand.
10 times.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Ouch, right. And so
I can see why that would make somebody cough even harder.
exactly. And that's exactly what Lao Lai does. He starts,
Oh, no.
coughing even more. And he's like, are you trying to cure my cough or empty my wallet, doc?
Right.
So I'm curious, why do you think this idea of imported medicine being so much more expensive is funny, but also kind of hits a nerve with people in China?
Well, I think it plays on a couple of things. First, there is this perception that foreign goods are, sometimes fueled by marketing just better, right? More trustworthy. And this plays out especially in healthcare,
Right.
where people are already kind of anxious about, their well-being.
Yeah, so it's like when you're worried about your health, are you going to trust the familiar local brand or one that sounds like super fancy and imported that has a big price tag?
Totally. And you add in the fact that China has had, in the past, some high-profile scandals with like domestic drug quality. I think it makes sense why that anxiety around local brands might linger.
That makes total sense. So it's not just about snobbery. There's a real history that feeds into these anxieties. So, okay, so the doctor's like totally unfazed by Lao Lai's like coughing fit. And he just points to the local cough syrup and he's like, yeah, we got to buy one, get one deal right now. Plus, you get a free cough patch for your forehead.
A cough patch for your forehead. Okay, that is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, it subtly reinforces this idea that maybe the local stuff isn't as good, right?
Right.
Like they have to throw in all these kind of extras to make it appealing.
It definitely plays into that perception for
Yeah.
sure. And it makes you wonder too, like, is this preference for imported medicine always justified,
Right.
Are they actually better, or are we just seeing like the power of marketing and maybe even a bit of a status symbol thing attached to these foreign brands? What do you think?
That's a great question, and I think it's something that requires like a deeper look. There might be cases where the imported medication, truly is superior, maybe because of like stricter quality control standards or something in other countries.
Right.
But I also think we have to acknowledge that this perception isn't always based in, in facts. Like sometimes it's just perception.
So we've got this complex mix of historical anxieties, clever marketing, and maybe even a bit of like economic signaling all wrapped up in this one joke about expensive cough syrup. I love that.
It's fascinating.
It is. So let's move on to the next scene where Lao Lai overhears a conversation about generic drugs and things get even more interesting here.
So now we're getting into generics.
Yeah.
Which, in a lot of countries, generics are seen as kind of a way to make medicine more affordable. But I'm guessing Pills and Bills takes maybe a slightly different approach.
Yeah, you guessed it.
Ah.
So in this scene, there's this guy who is bragging about how he found this super cheap generic blood pressure medication, right?
Okay.
But then the punchline is that the packaging is basically like an exact copy of the name brand drug.
Oh, wow.
Typos. Eh?
Typos and all.
So it's like a counterfeit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's, obviously that's hilarious. But it also points to this like really serious issue with counterfeit medications
Right.
and plays on that fear, right? That maybe those generic meds aren't what they claim to be.
Yeah, it's like, okay, sure, it's cheap, but what are you really getting?
Right.
Right, and the joke doesn't stop there, right?
Yeah.
So the guy's relative who actually took this generic blood pressure medicine, like, his blood pressure didn't actually improve. But he did lose weight from all the trips back and forth to the hospital to complain about it.
Oh, no.
Okay, so it's poking fun at the kind of potential ineffectiveness, right, of these counterfeit drugs. But there's also this layer of satire about, like, the healthcare system itself.
Right.
Right? Like, how frustrating is it that somebody has to keep going back to the hospital just to, like, get their concerns addressed?
Totally. It highlights that disconnect for sure. And it makes you think, what if this was me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, could I actually trust that the medicine I'm taking is legit?
Right. Right.
So, you know?
And this scene, I think, it goes beyond just kind of counterfeit medications, right? It really caps into this broader concern about the affordability of healthcare in China. I mean, the government has, they've been working to make healthcare more accessible, but there's still this tension between, cost and quality.
Right. So it's almost like the scene is asking, can you really have both?
Yeah.
Like, are people being forced to choose between, like, these expensive name brand drugs that they believe are more reliable or, like, cheap generics that might not be effective?
Yeah. And I think that reflects this dilemma that a lot of people face, not just in China, but all around the world. The desire for affordable health care is universal, but so is the anxiety about, is that affordability coming at the expense of quality?
Right. And this kind of reminds me of what you mentioned earlier about China's history with, like, these drug quality scandals.
Yeah.
Do you think those past events are still shaping people's perceptions today?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's, it's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
Those scandals, I think, really eroded a lot of trust in the domestic pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And it takes time to rebuild that trust.
So even if the government is making strides in improving drug quality, there's still this, like, lingering skepticism that's hard to just shake off.
Right, exactly, like a shadow that hangs over it, even as things are improving.
Okay, so we've talked about, like, these expensive imported meds, right?
Yeah.
And then these, potentially ineffective generics. Now things take a really, really wild turn in the next scene. We're talking pharmaceutical blind boxes.
Wait, blind boxes for medicine? Like those surprise toy boxes that are so popular?
Yes.
Okay, that sounds crazy.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but that's exactly what the dialogue is satirizing here. So we've got this scene where a pharmaceutical company is releasing a mystery box.
Okay.
Where you literally don't know if you're going to get, like, a groundbreaking new drug or just, like, candy-coated chocolate.
Wow.
And it gets even better. The disclaimer says, efficacy is random, refund if effective.
Okay, that is just brilliant. I mean, it's taking this trend of blind boxes, right? Which is already about kind of the thrill of the unknown.
Right.
And applying it to something as serious as medicine. I mean, what do you think the dialogue is trying to say here?
Well, I think on one level, it's funny, right? Like the absurdity of buying a medication without knowing what it is or if it even works. But I think there's a darker side to this joke as well.
Yeah, you're right. It feels like it's a commentary on kind of the increasing commercialization of healthcare, right?
Yeah.
And the potential for companies to maybe prioritize profits over, like, patients' well-being.
Yeah, it's almost dystopian in a way.
Totally.
Right. Like, what if we get to a point where access to, like, new treatments is determined by luck or, the ability to gamble on a mystery box.
Right.
And the fact that the dialogue specifically uses blind boxes, which, are so popular in China,
Right.
makes it, like, super relevant to the audience, right? So it's like holding up a mirror to this specific cultural trend and saying, is this what we want our healthcare system to become?
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's not just satirizing, like, the pharmaceutical industry, right? It's also it's satirizing consumer culture and this fascination with randomness and surprise. And it makes you wonder, like, are we so obsessed with kind of the next big thing, the next viral trend,
Right.
that we're willing to apply that same logic to something as like central as our health?
It's definitely it's a thought-provoking idea for sure.
Yeah.
But, we also got to remember this is still a comedy. Right? So while it's raising these, like, very serious questions, it's doing so in a way that's still, engaging and even makes us laugh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of satire, right? It can kind of, sneak in some really profound ideas under the guise of humor.
Yeah.
So we have these three scenes, right?
Uh-huh.
Each kind of tackling a different aspect of the healthcare system in China.
Yeah.
What connections are you seeing between them? Like, do they build on each other in some way?
That's a great question. I think they definitely do. I think each scene kind of builds on the anxieties established in the previous one.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it starts with that basic anxiety about trusting local versus imported medications, right?
Right.
And then it moves on to the worry that even if you choose like a cheaper generic option, it might not actually be effective or could even be harmful, right?
Right, so the anxiety kind of escalates with each scene.
Exactly, and then it culminates in this like almost absurd scenario of these pharmaceutical blind boxes.
Right.
Which takes that distrust to like a whole other level. It's like the dialogue is saying, what if you can't even trust that the medicine you're buying is actually medicine?
Wow, that's a really insightful observation. It's like a progression of anxieties, each one kind of building on the last,
right,
until it reaches this point of like almost surreal absurdity.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this dialogue so effective. You know, it's not just poking fun at these like isolated issues. It's really painting this broader picture of the anxieties that people in China have about their healthcare system.
And is doing so in a way that's both like thought-provoking and hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to kind of touch on one more point that I found particularly interesting.
Okay.
So throughout the dialogue, there's this like underlying theme of information, right? And how it's used or maybe misused within the healthcare system.
Interesting.
Yeah. So think back to that scene with the imported cough syrup, right?
Yeah.
The doctor doesn't really explain why the imported version is like 10 times more expensive. He just kind of states that price difference as if it's like a given, you know?
Yeah. He leaves Lao Lai and the audience to kind of fill in the blanks.
Exactly. And that lack of transparency, I think, feeds into the anxiety, right? It makes you wonder, is the price difference actually justified? Or is it just about marketing and exploiting people's perceptions?
Right. And then this theme of information or lack thereof continues in that generic drug scene too, right?
Right.
Like we don't really know if those generics are actually ineffective or if the guy's relative just had like bad luck.
Right.
You know, and it's that uncertainty, I think, that creates anxiety.
And then it just explodes in the blind box scene, right? Where you're literally buying medication without any information about like what it is or what it does.
That's true.
Right. So it's like the dialogue is highlighting how a lack of information or even misinformation can contribute to these anxieties around healthcare.
It makes you think about, the importance of access to reliable information.
Yeah.
Right. And the role that transparency plays in building trust, especially in a system as important as healthcare.
Totally. It's like the dialogue is suggesting that maybe like one of the antidotes to these anxieties is more open and honest communication between healthcare providers, pharmaceutical companies, and the public.
Yeah, that's a powerful takeaway.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond, just the Chinese context.
Right.
I think that's something we can all relate to, regardless of where we live.
Well said. Well said. So as we kind of, delve deeper into these cultural and societal implications of pills and bills, I think it's important to keep this theme of information in mind, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the anxieties themselves. It's also about like what can be done to address them, right?
Totally.
And I think
that's a perfect segue into kind of the final part of our deep dive where we can maybe explore some of those potential solutions and what this dialogue might be suggesting about, the future of healthcare in China and beyond.
Okay, so we've explored all these anxieties around healthcare in China, right? Which Pills and Bills so cleverly satirizes.
Yeah.
But I think what's really cool is how this dialogue uses humor, not just to point out these problems, but also to hint at, like, potential solutions.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just a rant. It's like it's offering some food for thought on how things could be different.
Right, exactly. And I think one of those hints lies in, the way the dialogue plays with this idea of knowledge and information.
Yeah. We talked about that lack of transparency, especially with that overpriced imported cough syrup.
Right.
It makes you wonder, like, what if patients had more information?
Right. What if the doctor had explained, look, the imported stuff might have slightly, higher quality ingredients because of, regulations in that country, but studies show it's not 10 times more effective.
Right. That would totally change the dynamic.
Right.
Suddenly, it's not just about, like, blind trust or falling for marketing. It's about making an informed choice.
Exactly. And that same logic applies to like the generic scene, right? If people had more information about like how generics are produced in China,
Yeah.
the regulations that are in place, maybe some of that distrust would ease.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
It's like the dialogue is suggesting that one way to address these anxieties is through like education.
Right.
Right, through empowering people to be kind of more informed healthcare consumers.
I think you're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not about just like blindly accepting what you're told. It's about like asking questions, doing your own research, and understanding like the why behind the what.
Totally. And that brings us to, that blind box scene, which while funny also feels like a warning. Right? Like a warning against just blindly following trends, especially when it comes to something as important as your health.
Totally. It's like a wake-up call, right? Like, hey, don't let healthcare become just another consumer product where you're like gambling on the outcome.
Yeah. It's a call for a more kind of critical and more conscious approach to healthcare decisions.
Which ties back to what we were saying about information.
Totally.
Right. If people are going to make those informed choices, they need access to reliable information.
Yeah, and that information needs to be, clear and understandable and free from like hype or manipulation.
Right. So it's almost like the dialogue is advocating for like a shift in the whole healthcare culture.
Yeah.
Where transparency and open communication become like the norm.
That'd be a huge shift.
Yeah.
But imagine the impact that it could have.
Right.
Right. If people felt more confident in the information that they were getting,
Yeah.
if they felt like they were truly a part of that decision-making process,
Yeah.
Wouldn't that alleviate a lot of the anxiety?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about moving away from that like doctor knows best mentality and towards like a more collaborative approach to healthcare.
Totally,
Yeah.
where patients are empowered to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and advocate for their own well-being.
Exactly. It's like Pills and Bills is saying, let's laugh at these anxieties,
Yeah.
but let's also use that laughter as like a springboard for change.
What a powerful message. And it's not just limited to China, right? I mean, this desire for more transparency, more patient empowerment in healthcare, this is something that we're seeing globally.
Yeah, so while this dialogue is, it's rooted in the specific context of China,
Yeah.
the themes it explores are very universal.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that humor can be a powerful tool for social commentary, for prompting reflection, and for sparking these conversations that can lead to real change.
Yeah, well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Pills and Bills, I think the key takeaway is this. Let's use laughter as a way to confront these anxieties, but let's not stop there, right? Let's channel that laughter into a push for, more transparency, more education, and ultimately a healthcare system that's more responsive to the needs and concerns of the people that it serves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listeners out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep. And remember, sometimes the best medicine is a good laugh, followed by a healthy dose of critical thinking.
要你命来！第一场医院药房进口药风波，场景医院药房前，老李满脸痛苦，捂着嘴咳嗽连连几切。老朱啊，我这咳嗽都快把肺咳出来了，您快给我支支招。老朱关心的，哟，那还等啥？赶紧去医院找大夫开点药啊！老李悔意，绘声绘色，我去啦！一进药房就跟大夫说。大夫，给我来瓶德国止咳糖浆。老朱略带惊讶，点名要进口的，要求还挺高。老李，理所当然。那可不，想着进口的效果能好点。结果您猜咋着？老朱好奇的咋着？老李平淡。大夫推推眼镜跟我说，德国糖浆咱这儿只有国产，可必听。老朱无奈的得，没进口的。那换国产的呗。老李一听，眉头紧皱，生气的提高音量。我一听就不乐意了，说我就要进口的。老朱笑着调侃，哼，你还挺轴。老李接着大夫不紧不慢掏出计算器，笑着说，行，原价380，自费价3800，语气轻松，仿佛在说一件平常事。老朱惊讶地张大嘴巴，啊，这差价抢钱呢吧？老李被呛得咳嗽更剧烈，气急败坏。 我一听这价，直接被呛住，咳嗽的更厉害了。咳，您这是治咳嗽还是治钱包？老朱大笑，边笑边哈哈。你这问的太妙了。老李带着些许推销的意味，大夫还淡定呢，指了指旁边的咳鼻亭说，要不您试试这个，买1送1，还送止咳贴，贴脑门上。老朱哭笑不得，这都什么跟什么呀，太离谱了。第二场，医院走廊仿制药闹剧，场景医院走廊，丙和丁站在一旁交谈，老李和老朱路过，听到他们的对话，停下脚步。老李摇头叹气，感慨道，老朱啊，这买药就够让人头疼了，还有更离谱的事儿呢。老朱好奇，迫不及待，还有啥离谱事儿？快讲讲。老李兴奋的样子眉飞色舞。我听说啊，有个人拿着国产降压药，兴奋的不行，跟旁人说，瞧见没，国产降压药1粒才5毛。老朱惊讶的提高音量，哟，这么便宜，能管用吗？老李。另一个人凑近一看，皱起眉头说，这包装咋跟原研药一模一样，连错别字都照抄，语气带着质疑和不满。老朱瞪大双眼，气愤的，这也太不像话了，这能行？老李充满调侃，摇头晃脑，前面那人还得意洋洋呢，说这叫致敬经典。老朱无奈的，这叫什么歪理呀？老李拍大腿的动作，惋惜地说，结果呢，这人说他3姨吃了这药，血压没降，体重降了。老朱满脸疑惑，不解地问，这怎么回事？吃降压药还能减肥？老李夸张大声，他一拍大腿说，天天跑医院问疗效，愣是瘦了10斤。老朱大笑，嘿，这药没治病，倒成减肥神药了。第3场，医院候诊区药企卖盲盒风波，场景医院候诊区，人声嘈杂，物和己说得热闹，周围一圈人听得入神。老李和老朱路过，好奇凑了过去。老李满脸通红，跺脚，老朱，你瞅瞅现在的药企，简直太不务正业了。老朱瞪眼追问，又咋了？快别卖关子了。老李叉腰模仿生气者，有人气坏了，直喊，药企都去搞仿制，新药研发没人管。老朱忙点头，这可不行，以后咱还指望用啥新药啊？老李模仿反驳，翻着文件，有人不同意，边翻东西边说，谁说的？老朱皱眉，提高音量，难道是集采的事儿？老李连忙摆手，不可能，集采后销量挺好的。老朱撇嘴，拉倒吧，阿司匹林长绒片才3分1片，能赚啥？成本都不够，连做胶囊的材料都比这值钱。老李深呼吸，激动爆料，还有更离谱的，药企不卖药，改卖盲盒了。老朱长叹，今年这怪事一桩接一桩啊。老李眼睛一亮，掏盒子，有人直接掏出个盒子，说看药企新品可能是抗癌药，也可能是麦丽素。老朱惊恐大喊，这太荒唐了，吃错咋办？这不是拿人命开玩笑吗？老李模仿淡定，轻松地说，人家淡定得很，说明书写着疗效随缘，吃好返现。老朱脸涨红，指着前方，这不是瞎搞吗？咱老百姓可咋办啊？